When we are anxious, no matter what you are anxious about, whether it be a pandemic, having a conversation with someone, asking someone out on a date, whatever it is, you can go to the best therapist in the world. You can read every book on anxiety. But the only thing that frees us from anxiety is doing the thing we are scared to do. As the only thing. You can work on that mindset. You can have Post-its all over your house with positive affirmations. But if you are not engaging...
I immediately saw the picture of that cat just like barely holding on. It says, hang in there on the poster. One of those motivational posters.
You can wallpaper your house with those things. But if you are not engaging in that behavior change, if you are not stepping outside of your comfort zone and doing the thing that you are afraid to do, then that anxious voice will continue to have a lot of power in your life. And that comfort zone, that bedroom that you work in your home, will become your prison. And so, yes, I completely agree. It is doing the thing, that it is doing the behavior that will reinforce that truth you're trying to cultivate in your mind.
You know, it makes me think about athletes or musicians, you know, and they often talk about when you get into flow, which is that, that idea of being in the zone, that in that point, you're not thinking.
Yeah.
Right. And so we can almost overthink it, right? Because then now we're getting into the technical, how I'm going to throw this ball, I'm going to play this instrument. And then it never turns out the way that we want it to. And I find for me, the more I do it, the more I can get myself back in that position. And I'm not thinking. I'm just, I'm in that flow state.
Yes.
But the more I spend time in the room, the more I'm not going to do that.
Exactly. And this is one of those truths that people don't want to hear, like, no, but it's so important. You know, so often we avoid things because we think, oh, if I avoid that, then I don't feel anxious. And so that's how I manage my anxiety, by avoiding that thing. But avoidance just makes our anxiety grow. Avoidance is never the path to freedom. It is never the path to health, if you will. It just exacerbates it. And so it is overcoming that avoidance pattern.
So I love that idea that the more you avoid it, the bigger it grows. And again, I guess the way my brain's working today, I immediately thought back to my youngest, Aaron, who's 15 now. But when he was little, he was terrified of Ursula at the end of the Little Mermaid movie.
Yes.
Terrified.
Yes,
terrified.
I understand
We
that.
could watch Indiana Jones movies with guys' hearts getting ripped out. He was like, oh, this is a great movie. But Ursula shows up. Oh, no. Full stop. Full stop.
Yeah.
And there's a Little Mermaid ride in one of the Disney parks, and there's Ursula outside. And as soon as he would see Ursula, he would just like grab us really tight, like end of the world.
Right.
And I had to finally take him into my office and pull up a YouTube clip and show the very end of the movie where Ursula kind of, it's the end of Ursula.
Yeah.
And he watched it and he was like, oh, she's not that scary after all.
Right.
And then it ended right there.
Right.
But he wouldn't face it. And the more he wouldn't face her, the bigger and bigger it got to where Ursula was the only thing in the world that really petrified him. Everything else was fine. Roller coaster's fine. Ursula, no go. So I think there's something about just facing it and actually doing it. Okay. So if we start to land our plane a little bit here, what are some good tips or takeaways if people are listening to this right now? And oh, by the way, one more thing I want to add just to validate your point. I had a client of mine who worked with an all virtual company for many years, and they were virtual before the pandemic. And she said, and she wasn't sure if it was if this was the chicken or the egg, what came first, but she said, because she oversaw HR as one of her functions, she said, we have a higher than average population of employees that need a lot of mental health support.
Interesting.
And again, back then it wasn't, maybe that was why they chose all virtual, because it was just easier for them in their life, or was the all virtual contributing to it? But either way, if we take that as an example, that's the path we're heading down. So if folks are listening to this and they say, yeah, that's me. Yeah, I felt that. Either in a generalized sense or like me, going out and speaking in public is freaking me out. What are some steps they can start to take to get back on the path of feeling healthy, feeling strong, having that sense of agency and resilience that we've been talking about today?
Great question. And there are, many different ways to answer that question. The first thing that comes to my mind is to get curious, get curious about your anxiety. Oftentimes we're feeling anxious and we think, oh, there's something wrong with me, I'm feeling anxious. And then we feel anxious about our anxiety, right? And so I encourage people, let's just get curious about it, just objectively curious. What is it that I'm feeling anxious about? And let me name all the things and let me play that tape out. I'm afraid if I bomb this next speaking gig, then I won't be asked back, and then they'll tell this company, oh, he won that, great, and it'll create let's go ahead and play it out. Let's go ahead and play out the worst case scenario. So I think getting curious about all the things that I'm feeling anxious about, even writing them down, because our anxious thoughts, they have to get out. When we keep things inside our minds, they sound right as rain. But if we can speak them aloud to a friend, to a counselor, if we can write them down in a journal, we begin to see, oh, well, that's a little extreme, or, oh, I see the lie in that. We can begin to tease the lie out from the truth. So I think getting curious about our anxiety, creating, if we are anxious about doing specific things, this isn't so much the case now, but earlier in the pandemic, a lot of people had COVID anxiety and re-entering social, like going back to restaurants or going to parties again. And so then, I've identified, I'm feeling anxious about eating out again. And so begin to think of creating, okay, baby steps, all right? So I'm gonna walk into the restaurant and pick up my food, okay? Yeah. I could do that. Okay, I'm gonna walk into the restaurant, pick up my food, and then I'm gonna sit outside at their outdoor eating area. And so baby steps, how can I begin to face this anxiety in a baby step way? The other thing that comes to mind is really to begin to look at your connections in your life. Isolation, along with avoidance, isolation exacerbates anxiety, again, because you're not reality checking any of your anxious thoughts. You're not exposing yourself to the potential of receiving empathy and care from others. And so looking at, am I reaching out to people? Am I connecting with people? The loneliness and the isolation, people are reporting higher levels of loneliness than ever before. And it's fascinating because we're more virtually connected. And so people think, well, I'm connecting with this person on WhatsApp and all the things, but that virtual connection is not a replacement for in-person connection. And we see that through the statistics. And so, again, holding yourself accountable of reaching out to people, seeing people in person. And with all of these things, it's important to remember that you're not going to want to do any of them. Yeah. You're not going to want to do any of these things. You're not going to want to get curious about your anxiety. You're not going to want to journal. You're not going to want to try a new behavior. You're not going to want to reach out to a friend. But what we have to remember is that if nothing changes, nothing changes.